The Bicameral Conference Committee has approved the proposed 5.26 trillion peso national budget for 2023.
Pumalag ang ilang mambabatas sa pagbalik sa kinaltasang confidential funds ng Department of Education at sa pondo ng National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict.
We agree to restore it, but we ask the agency to be more efficient and prudent kasi as of now, it's only 2% were utilized for year 2022. December na ho ngayon. So we urge and we na utilize it, sayang ng 98% kung sa tingin natin na nakakatulong yun ng maigi.
Yung mga nabawasan, yung mga special funds, tsaka yung may konting bawas at yung ibang foreign assisted projects, nilagay namin sa unprogrammed fund. Kasi under the unprogrammed fund, pag may foreign funding siya, pag nag-materialize na yung loan, pwede nang pondohan yun.
And just when everybody thought that it's out, the Education Department's full confidential fund turns up in the consolidated national budget. The state's anti-communist task force, the NTF-ELCAC, meanwhile, also got its 10 billion peso proposed allotment. What could have prompted lawmakers to restore the controversial budgets? We find out in this episode of The Chiefs. Welcome to The Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin online from Manila, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, and in Quezon City, Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5. Chiefs, good evening.
Hello. Happy top of the week.
Happy Monday. Ami, anong balita?
It's more fun in the Philippines now.
Oo nga.
Hindi, nag-issue ng statement related to funding, yung pinakamalalaking business groups, PCCI, Makati Business Club, financial executives, they are against the creation of the sovereign wealth fund. So this is a continuing story.
Oo nga kanina nga kausap ko si Mr. Calixto Chiquiamco. Sabi ko nga, it's the business groups have spoken out. Of course, a lot of members of the SSS and GSIS are speaking out, and then no less than the BSP governor has essentially said this is an ill-conceived idea. So my question was, sino kinusulta dito?
Hindi, pero Robbie, alam mo yung sabi ni sino ba to? Si Congressman Raul Salceda sa interview ni Ted Filon. Hipokrito daw yung BSP. Sinuggest pala, minungkahi pala nila yan last year in August. So nagulat nga siya na bakit kumukontra. So he called, the BSP a bunch of hypocrites. Kasi even then, sila pa nga raw nagpo-propose noon.
Baka ba sitwasyon kasi last year.
Oh, it was totally different situation.
Pero pinangangalandakan nga nila that we're the bright star in Asia, di ba? With our 7.6 GDP.
Hello,
di ba?
That's growth rate. That's not
records daw, no? So yun daw ang basehan nila kung bakit.
Baka na-inspire ng 1 MDB.
But that's growth rate. In any case, that's not talking about the money that we have that we can play with, di ba? Parang yun naman. In any case, hindi naman tayo nagpapanggap ng mga ekonomista dito. This is, as Ami said, a continuing story, and it's something that we will actually be discussing also in this episode. And to that point, we'll speak to our first guest after a quick break. The Chiefs will be right back. controversial funds have been restored in the national budget after bicameral deliberations. What could have happened? Let's ask former Senate President Franklin Drilon. Good evening and welcome back to the Chiefs, Senator Drilon.
Good evening, Senator.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Romy. Good evening, Ami. Good evening, Lucy. Konti na lang, sasama na ako sa panel niyo.
Apo, game na game. Bumalik na po. Sumama na kayo. Ikasa na natin bago bumalik si Ed.
Inimber na kayo, sir.
Apo, bago makabalik si Ed Lingaw, ikasa na natin yan. Anyway, Senator, like we said, in the intro, akala ng mga tao, di ba, this was proposed, in particular, the confidential funds, NTF-LCAC, pagkatapos sinabi nag-deliberations, tinanggal daw, and then, so people assumed na, yun na siguro yun, di ba, tinanggal na, and then now people are surprised na, doon din pala mauuwi. So before, beyond the controversies and wherever people stand, maybe you could explain to us the process of how the budget deliberations work. Ganyan lang ba talaga yun? Parang actually yung huling proseso lang pala ang mahalaga?
Yes, Robbie. Una, just in terms of the process, this the budget is like any piece of legislation where disagreements between the versions of the House in the Senate and the Senate will be brought to the bicameral conference committee, where these differences will be threshed out. This being an appropriations measure, the House would always assert authority, prior authority, because by law and by constitution, the budget emanates from the House. So you ask the question, the process, yes, that is the process. It goes to the bicameral conference committee. Now, yes, the matter of the confidential funds of the DepEd and the NTF-LCAC confidential funds were deleted or were reduced in the Senate budget, version of the budget. But then it went to the BICAM, and they agreed, the BICAM agreed to restore this. Apparently, the Senate contingent agreed to restore this. Now, this is the political reality.
Yes.
The administration has supported the allocation for the first time of confidential expenses budget to the DepEd. That is supported by the administration, and since the administration has an overwhelming majority in the House, and then the difficulty of the Senate resisting it could result in a deadlock and a budget not being approved. So this is a reality that we face. This is the political reality that we face. First time I hear of the Department of Education having confidential funds. I will repeat what I have stated before, probably in your program, that gathering of intelligence information is the role of the security agencies, never of the agencies in the civilian sector, particularly the DepEd. Now, what I will put on record is that let's be careful. Now that we have started confidential funds for the DepEd, I can assure you that next year it will be there again for 2024. And not only will it be there, it will increase.
No, but the irony is they removed the confidential fund of the Justice Department as well as the Foreign Affairs Department.
Well,
and that's in effect what they're saying, no? That on the basis of this, they're saying in effect that they've been judicious, although they didn't use that word. Pero parang ganon, no? Bawian. So, binigay yan, pero tinanggalan naman yung justice, which is really weird because justice is involved in law enforcement, right?
Well, Lucy, I suspect in the Department of Justice, the confidential funds would pertain to the witness protection program, not gathering of information. And I was wondering why they reduced, if my assumption is correct, and I think it is correct, they reduced in effect the budget for the witness protection program, which is so essential for the successful prosecution of cases.
Yes, yes. So, okay, what I want to know is, in the BICAM, what weight does the Senate have then? If you're saying that, well, you know, we all know that the budget is really the job of Congress. And so, you know, we go through a process where the Senate also hears the different departments and agencies, and then they put forward their own version, only to find that in the end, the last say is that of Congress. Is that how it works?
Well, the reality is, if there is a deadlock, there is no budget. It has happened in the past when I was chairman of the Committee on Appropriations, when I was Senate President. There were instances when, because we could not agree, the Senate panel could not agree, then the budget for the preceding year was reenacted for the following year, and it is not good for the economy. But having said that, I do not know the circumstances behind the agreement of the Senate to restore these budgets, and it's unfair for me to make a judgment in the absence of information. But let me say that I put this on record, ingatan po natin. In the debate for the 2024 budget, which is just a year, which is an election year in effect, then you will have again confidential funds where the accounting and the auditing is different from the ordinary expenses, in that it is discretionary. It is a wide discretion is given, because the audit is through what you call a sealed envelope system. Meaning, as I have said in your program before, if I list down, I am a government official, if I list down that I bought information from Juan de la Cruz, that is accepted by practice by the COA, which should not be the case. There is no specific, the fact that it is considered as confidential or intelligence fund will not exempt them from audit. What it exempts them from is the detailed public accounting of these funds, because in the interest of the nation, in the public interest, it is kept confidential. But it doesn't mean, I emphasize this, the fact that it is confidential or intelligence fund would not exempt them from the constitutional mandate to audit expenditure of public funds.
Senator, ang pwede na lang mangyari ngayon sa presidential veto, no? Which is unlikely in the case of President Marcos vetoing an appropriation for his vice president. So ang tanong na lang ngayon, pag inaudit ng COA, which you're saying is required, no? Even for confidential and intelligence funds, which types of expenditures yung pwedeng i-disallow ng COA ang funding? Halimbawa, if it's a DepEd, pwede bang pumasok yan sa counterinsurgency functions, yung intel fund niya? Can the COA disallow that kapag doon sinabi, dito namin ginamit siya?
Well, if COA could disallow it, not in terms of policy, but in terms of compliance with the auditing rules. Because as a matter of policy, the political branches of the government has determined that DepEd will have confidential funds. Many of us disagree with that. I don't agree with it, but that is a policy issue. But it is subject to the same audit as any expenditure of public funds, only that it is not made public, but it can be audited. So,
pero kung outside the mandate, kasi lahat naman ng department created by law, di ba? Nakalagay dyan yung mga functions niyan eh. Kung outside the mandate of that department, pwede bang i-disallow ng COA yung expenditure?
No, because in this particular case, the political agencies of the government, Congress and the Senate, determined that gathering of information is part of the mandate and therefore they funded it. Remember that the budget is also a law and therefore by legal mandate, the political branches have stated, yes, the Department of Education's mandate includes gathering of information. We may disagree with that, but that's the policy adopted by our elected representatives. Now, it doesn't mean, though, that COA cannot audit this. COA cannot determine the correctness or the correctness of the policy of granting confidential funds to the DepEd. But it can audit the correctness of the expenditure by requiring them to auditing these funds. So as a matter of policy, COA cannot disallow. COA cannot say, Department of Education, you're not supposed to gather intelligence information. That they cannot do. That is beyond their scope. But for say that, okay, the 10 million given to XYZ is not supported properly, and therefore this is disallowed, they can do that.
But how will they know if it's supported properly or not? I mean, can they just claim, for example, that this is for intelligence gathering purposes? Isn't it that vague? I mean, because they're not supposed to get into the details precisely, right?
Well, that it is used for information gathering can be audited by COA. Pwede nang tanungin in closed session, saan yung ginamit ito? So, pwede po gawin yan. They can do that.
Pero,
Yung required resibo. Siyempre,
Yeah, walang mga ganon. Liquidation po.
pero Senator,
We're just talking about the constitutional boundaries. We're not talking about the application of this constitutional boundaries.
But Senator, in the sealed envelope system, so as you said, I mean, COA gets to take a peek, reviews it. But at the end of that process, does the public get to know what the COA finds out?
Good question. By tradition, no, it is kept in the files of COA. But I repeat, it doesn't mean that these funds are exempted from audit. It is not.
But what's the value? What's the value of that? What's the value of that audit? I mean, do we just do it for the sake of auditing, or is there accountability, notwithstanding no transparency, complete transparency to the public?
Well, Robbie, you have to there is a situation where you balance the interest of the state and the public interest. In other words, is it to the interest of the state that you reveal from whom the information was purchased? Because that is the implication. And the sealed envelope system would be useless if you allow public dissemination of the audit of the intelligence funds. So it's a question of public interest. It's a question of two competing interests: the interest of transparency and the interest of the security of the state.
Okay. Sir, atras lang ako ng konti. And we do appreciate this education and insights on all the way to the audit process. But I want to go back to the nature of our Congress right now. The reason I asked about the process, and as you said, at the end of the day, these were not your words, but at the end of the day, yan ang Kongreso natin ngayon. You have a super majority, and whatever independent mind you might have in the Senate, that gets diluted in the whole of Congress. So ang tanong ko na lang po, kung ganun lang din pa, sabihan nyo na kami kung ito na lang aasahan namin for the next 6 years. I mean, is that necessarily it? I know the budget is a different animal. It sort of holds us hostage in the final year. We don't want to not have a budget, so I get that. But we have so many other controversial bills spending at basically at the whims and the mercy of a supermajority. So, are you telling us, ganyan na talaga, ito yung supermajority, basically, kung ano magustuhan nila, yan na yan?
Robbie, at the end of the day, it's a question of how the people would exercise its ability to elect the correct leaders. I will not accept the proposition na ganyan na yan. I do not believe in that because, again, I would rather have democracy and all its warts as long as there are appropriate institutions that can be tapped by putting in the correct people rather than saying we give up. What would we prefer? An appointed Congress? I think the consequences are terrible and would far outweigh the advantages of a freely elected Congress for all its deficiencies. So it's a political issue, it's a political question, and the electorate is a political body.
Paano yun ngayon? Yung House is now pushing for the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The House leadership, in fact, the relatives of the President.
Yes.
And may I, because we're talking about the budget, they're going to set aside 25 billion of the budget. I mean, pag natuloy, to the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Pwede ba yun? Paano yun?
Lucy, again, theoretically, in theory, if your representatives do not react or do not act in the manner that you had conceived to be the correct way of doing things, then the response is in the next election. In theory, you should not vote for them. But in your specific issue of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, you know, this will be subject to a lot of debate. I was in the Senate for 24 years. We debate a lot there in the Senate. Why? Because the Senate, Lucy, is more conscious of public opinion as against members of Congress because of the nationally elected status of the senators. They are conscious of what the chiefs will be saying because this can affect their support. Whereas a congressman from a rural district wouldn't care what the chiefs are saying as long as they can deliver to their constituency what they feel is needed by their people, then they'll get re-elected. So that's precisely the difference, and that was supposed to be how it should work, that the Senate should not be pressured, should not be under the same pressure as a member of Congress because the constituency is nationwide. That's the theory. Whether or not it works is another matter. But you're not. When I was in the Senate, I would resist pressures from the office of the president, but I would still bring benefits to my province and my city. So it really depends on each individual senator and each member of Congress.
Yeah, but that's precisely why I asked that question earlier. Certainly, I think all of us are with you. You know, we would prefer democracy, warts and all. And certainly, we did not ask yung ganito na ba yan in terms of forever. I guess the question is ganito na ba yan until the next elections. I ask because we do get the same reassurances from the opposition, particularly the very, very few opposition left in the Senate. We get the same assurance na hindi, mas independent mag-isip ang mga senador. Even if we were to grant all of that, precisely the experience of these past few days seems to suggest that that's well and good. But we just spoke with Senator Drilon, tama ba pagkakaintindi ko, na at the end of the day, pupunta pa rin niya sa supermajority sa House of Representatives, and that is the Congress right now.
Yeah. Well, that is correct. It goes to the House of Representatives in this particular case because it is an appropriation measure which originates from the House, not from the Senate. But theoretically, the BICAM is precisely the venue to reconcile these differences. I am not in a position to comment on what happened in the BICAM. I am just we are confronted. I am confronted, like you are, and our public, with the fact that the funds which were deleted in the Senate version were restored by the BICAM. So we will look at it, and in the next few days we will be debating on it, what the effect of this on the operations of government and how the public will react is something that we have to see in the next several months. But I would strongly advocate that that this issue of confidential and intelligence funds should be scrutinized more strongly in the coming years. The NTF-ELCAC, for example, I was fighting this tooth and nail when I was there. Because again, this is a new creation. It was started by the previous administration, by certain retired generals, and it has, it has become a source of abuse of discretion. I was questioning them. Saan nyo nilagay itong pera ito? This is for, sabi nila, for the NPA, insurgency-free barangays. But couldn't that service be done by the ordinary line agencies? Should it be with NTF-ELCAC and a confidential fund where the accounting is less than transparent by the nature of the allocation? So these are matters which I would think should draw attention of media, for example, to keep on harping on this, because as I said, theoretically, the Senate can withstand the pressure of Malacanang as the political leader of our government. I would dati nung panahon nung Blas Ople, nung ibang kasamahan ko, ay talagang hindi sila po papayag. Kung sa tingin nila, if they feel that it is not correct, they stand their ground, and no pressure can be brought on them, because I would repeat, the senators are more conscious of how they're perceived by the general elected, by the public, through the views that expressed in the media. So that is how it should be.
Pero Senator, as you said, it's allowed eh. Kung sakasakali, theoretically, can Congress set parameters on the allocation of confidential and intelligence funds, or does it have to go to the Supreme Court? And even if it goes to the Supreme Court, can the judiciary impose rules on budget appropriations in the end? Pwede ba yun? Sino magsaset ng parameters sakasakali?
Ami, on the specific issue of whether the Supreme Court can say it is improper to allocate confidential funds to the Department of Education, no. In my humble opinion, the Supreme Court cannot do that, because that is in the area of a policy of government which is enunciated by the Congress, and there is nothing unconstitutional in my view. You cannot say that the allocation of confidential funds to the Department of Education is a violation of the Constitution. It is an exercise of judgment and policy of the political branches of government.
Pero bakit naibawal ng Supreme Court yung lump sums? Di ba?
Well, no. Lump sum, if you look at it, it's a lump sum. What was struck down by the Supreme Court is the post-budget intervention, meaning you place a budget of 1 billion, and then we legislators will say, of the 1 billion, you allocate 10 million for a bridge. That is not allowed, because that is a intervention by the legislators on the budget allocation after the budget is approved. Because after the budget is approved, it is the executive who executes it. It is Malacanang who executes the budget. not the legislature. But in the case of PDAF, the system was we in Congress interfered in where the lump sum will be spent. It is different in the case of the confidential funds because Congress has said the Department of Education can be allocated confidential funds because in our view, the policy should include that the school system be used to gather confidential information.
Okay.
There is nothing unconstitutional about that. It's a policy issue, and the Congress is answerable to the people, not to the Supreme Court.
Senator Drilon, or should I say Mr. Drilon, for this final question na lang for this ano. We've been asking you to, as a former senator, maybe even as a former Justice Secretary, but let me ask you on the plane na sama-sama tayo ngayon, Citizen Drilon. As you said, let's have our positions, our stands to bear upon our legislators, have our voices heard. Short of having to wait for another elections na sa totoo lang, di ba? A lot of people find that difficult to imagine right now. Short of that, and given the urgency of really gagalawin niyo yung SSS funds ko, gagamitin yung GSI pension funds ko, and so on. Right now, as a fellow citizen, what can people really concerned about this issue and other legislative matters do from your experience in civil society?
Well, firstly, Robin, I do not know how this sovereign fund will look like at the end of the day. But I am not discounting the fact that there could be constitutional issues raised on, for example, thus the assignment of or thus the required investment of GSIS and the membership funds constitute a breach of the trust relationship between the fund owners and the managers. These are issues which can be brought to the Supreme Court. So it is not as if there are no remedies available. There are remedies available. Just focusing it on the sovereign wealth funds, the issue can be brought to the Supreme Court on a number of provisions, depending on how it will be in the final version of the law.
Okay. Senator Franklin Drilon. Sir, always a pleasure, and we'll take you up on your invitation. I think we will already flag the executives. You have the news chief right here, nodding her head. Mukhang, eto na.
Yes, let's do that at least once a week.
At the rate I'm appearing in your program, I might as well be part of your panel. That's what I say.
Bok.
Gratis, sir, gratis.
Gratis. Okay, gratis. Go.
Sige. Okay,
Pro bono yan. Pro bono service.
Gratis. For
Pro bono service.
and public interest case, yes.
Ayan.
Gratis.
Sige po. Bok, kung nanonood ka, sorry na lang ha. Anyway, Senator Franklin Drilon, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator.
And we'll start up another
Thank you, sir.
conversation after this break. The chiefs will be right back.
BSP Governor Felipe Medalla has cautioned against the proposed Maharlika Wealth Fund. Speaking to Bloomberg TV, Medalla says he is concerned over management issues, citing Malaysia's experience with the scandal-tainted state fund, One Malaysia Development Berhad, or 1MDB.
If you do have that sovereign wealth fund, would the BSP be willing to invest some of its foreign reserves into the fund?
My personal view is unless we are compelled, we should not. But I'm a law-abiding person. If the law says we will, we will.
Ang isa naman sa mga nagsusulong nito na si Congressman Joey Salceda, tinawag na ipokrito ang BSP.
The BSP is being hypocritical. They are the first one to introduce this concept. Huwag na ho tayo maglokohan. Ang BSP ang nagpasimuno ng lahat ng ito.
But the whole point of this is that it is free from politics. It will be run like a private corporation, hopefully by technocrats that know what they're doing, to be able to make sure that the government's money is used properly and invested the right way.
You're still watching the Chiefs on One News. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin si Ami Pamintuan at si Lucy Cruz Valdez. At kasama ko sa studio, Ed Lingao. Hindi pala si Ed Lingao, si Richard Heydarian po. Biglang pumuti si Ed. Deputy Chief po. Nako, get in line. Mayroon kaming medyo bigatin na Deputy Chief din. Anyway, we're here with Richard Heydarian. We'll talk about the Sovereign Wealth Fund. But I want to start off with, how big of a political risk is this?
Yeah.
To be talking about the pension funds of people, aside pa from all people's concerns about corruption and so on. I mean, people are talking about 1MDB as if they've been following Malaysia all of these months. But how big of a political...
Nakulong Kinulong yung Prime Minister nila. So I think, first of all, on one hand, yung mga proponents sinasabi nila na this is going to be purely technocratic, we'll leave it to the experts, the president will be there for critics. Yung pangalawa is, Bakpin or Vision 2040 Philippines. Why not? You know what I'm saying? Like, I could think of 10 other more neutral technocrats. But the moment you use Maharlika and then Romualdez and Marcos is like, I'm not saying they're asking for it, but it makes it very complicated. And clearly, ito pa, yung isa pang timing, meron tayong malaking issue with the confidential funds. Tapos isa pang fund. Kaya masabi ko, it's more fund in the Philippines, di ba? So, the timing is not actually right.
Hindi kaya nga, but ito yung all of these concepts, let's just call it all concepts. How concrete and how crystallized is all of this in the minds of the public? To the point that this actually comes together and gives way to a potentially political dynamite.
Yeah, it could be a political dynamite if hindi nila ma-explain na mabuti paano hindi nangyari sa Malaysia sa Pilipinas, because Malaysia is a much more developed country than us. They have per capita 3 times than us. The other thing is, we also have many cases of even richer and more developed countries not going 1MDB, but misappropriating. For instance, vanity projects, bibilihan Newcastle United yung Saudi Arabia. We also have many
Singapore,
cases.
Idol nila Singapore, napaso sa FTX.
Exactly, and FTX, yung mga Bitcoin, mga cryptocurrencies. We have many people who invested in the tech sectors and the stock went south, no? So my point is, if you're a rich country, you have room for maneuver, you have room for mistake. But if you're a country with very limited resources like the Philippines, and sa panahon na ganito, na napaka poly-crisis ang tawag, multiple uncertainty, maybe this is not the best time to do this kind of investment vehicle mechanism. So it can work against them.
Okay, sige. Ami.
Richard, do we actually have a surplus to invest? Di ba, of course, we have international reserves, pero sinabi na nga ng BSP, that will be used to stabilize the peso, no? You're talking about the countries with oil petrodollars.
Right.
Even Norway, that's oil money. And they lost a lot this year, January to June alone. Sinasite na siyang example because good governance siya, they have rule of law. Even Temasek, even Singapore lost money. So tayo ba, can we afford? Do we have enough surplus actually to invest?
My point is, di ba kung titignan mo yung kasaysayan ng Sovereign Wealth Fund, it was a response to, for instance, Asian financial crisis dito sa Asia because sobrang grabe yung impact sa atin. Sa Europe naman, yung nangyari sa Netherlands, yung so-called Dutch disease, because yung kumita ng Netherlands sa malaki sa natural gas, etc., yung currency nila naging sobrang malakas, patay yung manufacturing exports nila. So Norway, na hindi ganun kalayo, tinignan niya yung situation ng Netherlands, ayaw ko maulit yan. And then in the case of Middle Eastern countries, they saw some other some other countries, when they injected that money internally, nagka-hyperinflation. Kasi ang daming pera, biglang pinasok mo, limitado yung produkto, ang daming pera. So, because of that, you have Qatar, you have UAE, you have Saudi Arabia going for it, Norway going for it, Singapore going for it. So, may kasaysayan naman yan. Hindi naman siya out of thin air. Ang point is, are we facing similar structural concerns? Are we looking for a caution? We do have a decent foreign exchange reserves. And in fairness naman sa Department of Finance and BSP to a certain degree, they were slightly effective in stabilizing the Philippine peso. Plus, of course, the remittances issue, reopening of China. Because we promised that $10 billion dun sa foreign exchange reserves natin, pwede natin gamitin to stabilize. I'm just telling you, wag tayong mata pobre sa sarili natin. Because even I think countries like Ghana have a sovereign wealth fund. So hindi naman ibig sabihin mayaman lang meron.
But that's one side of it, the fiscal side. But of course, the bigger question is the governance side.
But going to the fiscal side too, di ba? Ang contention ngayon is walang problemang GSIS, SSS. But we have some people, I think economists like Enrico Villanueva, for instance, came up with the numbers. You can check it on Twitter, which says, actually last year, ang laki ng deficit nung SSS and GSIS. So many economists who know the numbers, yeah, they're looking at that. Ang laking, at saka naalala natin yung mga unang mga first years ni Pangulong Duterte, ang laking issue itong pension na ito, di ba? At yun nga, they have to show us actuarially paano maging sustainable kung 100 billion dito, 100 billion dyan. Yung Land Bank naman of the Philippines, may mandato din yan, di ba? Dapat tulungan natin yung domestic farmers. So, my point is, kukuha ka dun sa mga iba na may ibang mandato at dun sa iba na potentially may budget deficit pa rin. I'm not sure how much surplus we really have. Kaya nga, going back, si Bam Aquino, he did in fact push for investment fund. But yung sourcing niya is from the General Appropriations Act. So doon pa lang tinignan mo dapat yung budget, then mag-assess ka how much goes to sovereign wealth funds. Hindi yung gagawa ka sa gitna, tapos na yung budget, and then pupulot ka dito and there. So we're not against the idea of sovereign wealth fund per se. And no less than Senator Amy Marcos has been raising this. The issue is that sustainable ba na kukunin mo dun sa mga ibang places na may allocations or potentially beseech sila fiscally speaking. So kaya sabi ko, the timing is a little bit issue, the way you raise the money is another issue. So I just want to say this, just because hindi tayo mayaman, hindi ibig sabihin dapat wala tayong sovereign wealth fund. Because many relatively poor countries have it. But it's the devil is in the details. That's the point.
Okay, so, hindi naman tayo mahirap. Hindi tayo kayamanan, pero hindi tayo mahirap. I get that. But to me the bigger question here is, do we trust? Isn't this a trust issue ultimately?
Yes, definitely.
Do we trust the board of that sovereign wealth fund, whatever that corporation is, to make decisions that are ultimately beneficial to us, whose money they will be using to invest, no? And then the fact that the president himself will be chairing this, does he know the risk? Is it a boon or a bane that it's our president who's actually going to be sitting as chair? So what's in it for him if he fails? Pwede ba natin yan ikulong? Nakukulong ba yan? Or they say ma-impeach, but how do you weigh the pros
the same
and
way that
cons
the Mama Sapano,
of the little provisions in regard to the governance?
Very good point. The same way that the Mama Sapano and the Yolanda issues were weaponized by the other side against Aquino and the Liberal Party, and the same way that, people want to use the issue of Dolomite Beach expenditure, this could potentially become that, kasi ganito rin syempre, para kumita ka sa investment mo, you have to take risks. But if your fear is it could have blowback on you, maybe you become too conservative, then what's the point of even... You get what I'm saying? Kasi konti na nga resources mo, assuming may surplus tayo, this could be politically very explosive. And then, let's not forget, there's a baggage issue. Kaya nga for me sana, if this administration first dealt with the trust deficit issue, push for good governance reform, come up with a new government agency that deals with corruption, resolve some of the baggages that is attached to the ruling family, etc., then we can move forward.
Oo.
Kaya nga yung point
Dahil dami nga nagsasabi, gusto mo ng fund, di bayaran nyo yung utang ng pamilya mo, yung mga nakaiba, yung tax. And I mean, I don't mean to be glib, but
Exactly,
it's a good point, and it's
Yes.
inevitable. It all goes back to Lucci's
The trust
point.
deficit issue, yeah.
Not just the trust, but objectively, in fairness to the president,
Yeah.
does he need this political risk? I'll throw
Yes.
in
Yeah,
there
you're
among
right.
Yes.
among the baggage. He hasn't even been able to extricate himself from shooting himself in the foot by appointing himself agriculture secretary in the middle of this, runaway prices. Tapos ngayon ipapasan niya pa ngayon to. Was this? I mean, this all just goes to why we invited you here.
Yeah.
Was this his idea? Was this his idea?
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, or should he be thanking his cousin?
Honestly, until kanina na binack up nila former President Arroyo among others, akala ko lang, siguro naman papogi lang yan. Or just, a shot across the bow. I thought maybe it's like that, just to see the public reaction. But suddenly I see na parang mukhang decidido sila. They're mobilizing people behind it. And we saw with the Senate, they caved in or they adjust. So my point is, they might really get through with this sovereign wealth fund. And my point is, you're absolutely right. The risk factors are too much, and you have no less than the president. Parang siya yung nagpa-insurance dyan. I mean, he's putting, he's staking his own office, and it's really risky considering he's already in charge of the agricultural issue, etc. So, ang fear ko dito is ma-overstretch yung ating Pangulo. No? And so, I'm not saying the president will be good or bad. What I'm saying is that the president is increasing his exposure. Potentially, even legal exposure down the road. No? And let's say, talaga, the record of sovereign wealth investments is not really something that is politically risk-free.
Not only that, and something that hasn't been talked about or explored a lot. And I don't think it's a minor point. But to that risk, the risk is precisely to what I think is one of the things that motivated Bongbong Marcos in the first place, which is really to try to rehabilitate and secure the family name.
Yeah.
If Maharlika fails in this context with the pension funds of people, then it digs up
the brand,
what people knew of Maharlika from the time of his father, which totally defeats his entire purpose.
This is a fantastic point, and this is my point also na kung titignan mo yung campaign, in fact, I had a back and forth with some journalists and friends who put like Marcos in
Where could you have that? I don't imagine where you can have it
on
back.
Twitter. I fight a lot on Twitter. I know that was sarcastic, pero pinatulan ko pa rin eh. No, I mean, some people put him in the same basket as Duterte, Bolsonaro, Trump. No, I define President Marcos Jr. as technocratic populist, right? Because he tries to project this mastery of economic issues, focus on economic development and growth. But parati may populist side, which is the legacy of his father. Kaya here, nakikitang-kita mo this Maharlika Sovereign Wealth Fund is the perfect embodiment of him trying to put two things together. Technocratic competence or projection of, and at the same time, the nostalgia for the Maharlika year and all. And from the reaction right now, we're saying it's a very hard balancing act. And it really increases his exposure.
The assumed nostalgia, the supposed nostalgia.
Well,
but anyway, I'll turn over. Ami,
the numbers are unfortunately,
Ami Lucci.
So yung bliss, i-revive Pati yung bliss.
Ako ang bata ko rito, Richard, it's Congress or the proponents. Are the proponents of this sovereign wealth fund using the political capital that the president has right now, knowing that he's very popular and that such a fund like this may actually be acceptable, and it's a way to actually recover the trust that the Marcos name has essentially lost. Do you and the fact that Congressman Sandro himself is one of the main proponents?
Yeah, that's a big thing. That's a big part of this.
Do you think there's that kind of agenda that's at work?
Well, ako naman, we have a precedence with President Duterte na very popular, but there are times that he was willing to expend political capital, for instance, dun sa tax reform issue, right? That was a very, very unpopular one among many people, although the business sector supported it. Technocrats supported it, and eventually the president went with it. But there are other issues, including sa West Philippine Sea, on China, on US, President Duterte had to recalibrate because the backlash was too strong, no? Including dun sa Reed Bank incident. So this is where I think we're going to see the mettle of President Marcos. You're popular like President Duterte, but how much are you willing to push the bottoms, push the envelope?
No, but the difference there with the tax reform is particularly the sectors that you cited supported the tax reform. Diba? Parang he was backed up by the establishment. You have the business community, the private sector, all for this. You had the foreign, but right now, nobody is backing this. I mean, not even the BSP governor.
Well, Joy said
it's just Congress. It's just Congress.
Yeah, yung business groups nga, di ba nag-issue na statement today? Yung
they're not backing. Yeah,
they're not backing it. And it's really a trust issue Ang nilalabas din ng tao is crony capitalism. How valid is that fear, Richard?
I think that...
Kasi tinatanong ng mga tao, saan di ba dadalhin yung pera namin? Where will you invest? You're not gonna invest overseas. Dahil lang sama-sama ng global economic situation ngayon.
Ang basa ko talaga is...
invest sa overseas dito. O sige, saan nyo i-invest dito? And yan na nga, lumalabas yan. Baka maging crony capitalism, fund dyan. How valid is that?
Yeah, again, in principle, I'm not against sovereign wealth fund, even if hindi tayo mayaman na bansa. But I'm saying, in the timing, the context, the branding, the name, the PR preparation, where's the creative communications? Yun ang hinahanap ko. Where was there's no creative communications. You just threw it there, and then you waited to see what's the reaction. And guess what? It's not good kasi may confidential fund issue ka na. Ito, back to what. So, I'm actually quite surprised. Medyo may pagka-amateur hour for me from a PR political capital standpoint. And then I think, feeling ko there are people there who thought, sovereign wealth fund, di naman gets ng tao yan, complicated
that's actually important.
We can get away with it. Well, guess what? People are actually zeroing on these issues. And, Maharlika yung ginamit pa
I remember.
At yun pa, exactly.
But
don't touch my money kasi yun issue. Exactly,
But teka muna, I remember something that you said the last time we were here and we were talking about the opposition. And you said, one problem for the opposition right now is they don't have that one person who can crystallize the issues for the public, who can express these things and capture all of these people. I think get a sense for it. We're certainly not underestimating. I think a lot of people, if we look at social media, they can grasp it. But at the same time, sabi mo nga, wala sa opposition who actually can be that person to seize this.
Well, Lenny would have been perfect, right? She's a graduate of also VP School of Economics, but actually, kanina I raised that. I said, I'm just curious what Lenny would think about it as someone who actually graduated from economics, etc. Immediately, I had their supporters reprimanding me, like, hayaan mo na siya, she needs a rest, she has been bashed too much, yung mga ganon. So, I think there's hesitation among the base of Lenny.
So leave Lenny out of it. The question is to the opposition.
But who are they rallying behind? So for me, naturally, Riza Ontiveros should be there. I'm looking for more Riza Ontiveros gaining traction in terms of yung positioning on top issues. I'm not sure she's 100% yet. I'm also not sure the supporters of Lenny are rallying behind Riza Ontiveros in the ways they should in order to create a robust successor to Lenny. Alam mo, parang ilang ang mga tao. Like, we're not 100% with Riza, but we're not sure we want Lenny to get back. Yun ang sense ko. I mean, I could be wrong. I got a lot of response online.
Do you think that the Senate will step up to its role as fiscalizer here?
Well, I saw no less than Amy Marcos and Jingo Estrada saying something on this, no? So, at least on the surface, it's an interesting thing, but I want to see the follow-through. Because nakita natin sa NTF-ELCAC, diba? Eventually, there was, the lower house won diba? Yeah. So I want to see, ayoko sana yung performative checks and balance. Yung parang, sige, scrutinize natin, pero sa dulo, it's just ticking the box lang. I hope hindi ganon.
Pagka may ganyan yung magkapatid na Marcos, no? Senator Marcos and President Marcos, we remember their first difference was really with the Bulacan airport, diba? Pagka may ganyan na episodes, ano ba? Baka naman, ibang tao kasi sabi, baka good cop, bad cop lang yan.
Yeah.
Or is there a genuine difference, if not rift, between the two of them?
Well, I mean, there's something called siblings rivalry. I don't want to say that's the case per se. I mean, Marcos, she has very strong opinion on things. And for me, you cannot say if it's good cop, bad cop. Yung iba, they feel there's a permission structure na to criticize. If the sister of the president is saying this, then might as well say it. In fact, personally, I waited for 48 hours before I made a comment. And I said, wow, that's interesting. Even the allies of the president are saying this. Then I felt more confident giving the cons as much as the pros. No?
Manila Times editorial.
Exactly. So that's my point. Na it creates a permission structure now because let's not forget, this is a president with a supermajority. This is a president with the first majority electoral mandate. He had 85% approval dun sa Okta research. So on the surface, dapat invincible, no? But there we see suddenly it's actually 50 shades of, not my fractures, but 50 shades of potential differences, etc. And I think that in itself, so parang naging opposition yung within na eh. I mean, minsan parang ganun eh. Internal checks and balancing na. So for me, even if this were just performative or good cop, bad cop, I don't see necessarily that as an, in fact, because I see a lot of opposition citing Amy Marcos. And later on, we see other aligned folks like Jingo Estrada also, following through. So for me, it's the effect that matters to me, not only the intention, even if the intention perhaps was good cop, bad cop, which I don't think is the case. I think it's quite a genuine policy difference. Not ideological. They're both very clear about what Marcos' legacy stands for, but on specific policy issue, we're seeing more and more kind of diversity of point of view.
Okay, we've run out of time. Richard Heydarian, this tends to happen a lot. Pagka nandito ka, ang bilis mawalan ng oras. But in the meantime...
Parang nag-guilty na naman. Is that your way saying madaldal ka masyado?
No, not at all. Not at all. Maraming salamat.
My pleasure.
And again, we will take it up with Luchi and everybody upstairs.
Maraming salamat.
The two applicants today.
Thank you, Richard.
No, I'm gonna back out. Mahirap tapatan yan.
Senator. No.
Let him have it.
In all seriousness, maraming salamat, Richard Heydarian. We'd also like to thank former Senator Franklin Drilon. And that is it for the Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Luchi Cruz Valdez of News 5.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.